Hi everybody.
Well,
My name is Ricardo Barrett. I am the Exhibitions and Collections Care Associate at the National Gallery of Bahamas, and I'm one of the curators for this exhibition, The Nation, the Imaginary.
hi. Yeah, I'm Letitia. I am also one of the curators for The Nation, the Imaginary, current associate curator at the NAGB.
I would start it off by saying, after 20 years of exhibiting, collecting, and supporting the art community as a whole, one of the things we wanted to highlight with this exhibition is definitely highlighting the work we've collected and thinking about how we move forward as it relates to the nation, but
Mhm.
also as it relates to the imaginary, thinking of what is and what could be, which is why we named it kind of the way we named it. Your thoughts,
Mhm.
Satish, on that as well?
Yeah, this is the first time the entire collection is on display, or all 500 works, which is a pretty big, it's a lot of work to hang. And so when we thought of the name for the show, like to represent what this collection was about, we thought that it would be fitting to call it The Nation, the Imaginary, because the art represents sort of the imagery of the nation. A lot of the artwork, especially downstairs, and we could talk about the structure of the exhibition later. But a lot of the artworks really interact with like colonial imagery, right, of Nassau in particular. And this constructing of what the Bahamas and Bahamianness is. And so when we like think about like the nation, the imaginary, some of the work that interact with this colonial imageries is also questioning this idea of the nation with their imagination, and it's also sort of like a tongue-in-cheek, like what is imaginary, what is real, especially when you go through all of these colonial imagery of Nassau, like is it real, things like that.
And thinking about all of that, this exhibition was curated. Pretty sure it's happened before, obviously, nothing new under the sun, but the idea of taking work that already existed and us having to create obviously a theme around the collection and not the other way around. Whereas you would come up with the theme and the idea for exhibition and then go find the work to kind of like pull that in, or you already have a theme working, whether it's a retrospective or something of the sort, and then you collect the work. We did it the other way around, which is in a lot of ways much harder because you have what you have and you have to make it work. And to the teacher's point in this regard, based on what we had, it was kind of like staring us in our face like this is the story, this is the narrative we have to tell. And it's very timely because of the 20th anniversary. And on top of that, at the same time, 50 years of independence, thinking that, it took the country like 30 years to the point where we would have established like a national institution. Obviously, there were other galleries and art movements happening, but it was just timely. So the way the actual exhibition is sectioned out, so a lot of times when we curate the space, we sort of have to curate it in sections to kind of flow better. So downstairs is curated from the perspective of the nation, kind of like taking the works that we have that are more so embedded in the pre-independence and some just right after independence. This idea of our stories being told by persons coming in, non-Bahamian artists, photographers. There's a lot of photographs about old Nassau. So essentially, it's the works and the imagery is taken from, if you're going to take a walk from Fort Montague all the way going to the gallery and then into the Bain and Grandstand community. So it's
Mm-hmm.
curated in that way. So you see like groupings of pieces, photographs together that kind of take a snapshot in time. And if you go back to some of these places, you see the same tree is there or the same building just renovated multiple times. So it also questions like, what has actually changed, like physically in the space. and that could play into like what has changed like mentally or even from a economy standpoint, like have we grown. So there's all these ideas of questioning what was and what is, and again, where are we going into. We also have like a tongue-in-cheek moment in the downstairs areas in the way we colored or painted the walls, because in the first section there's this government yellow, and then the two back sections is the government green and government pink, which are colors that like, have been colored, painted institutions for years. I know when we say government pink, most people have a color in their head that they know what that looks like.
Mhm.
So there's all these themings on what that is. Just to keep that explanation for downstairs short.
Yeah, I think one of the really good things about downstairs too is that you have like the cluster of the Queen staircase. Like there's different sections where you have multiple artists rendering the same, monument. And one of them is you have an Amos Ferguson painting from the back of the Queen staircase. Like this idea of like different perspectives is constantly coming up when we talk about, well, downstairs, but also it carries through to upstairs too, where upstairs you step into what we call the imaginary, but it's, yeah, you can call downstairs the imaginary too because it's colonial, but when you go upstairs, it's once again like a different perspective from the people, the locals that live here and who has to deal with these ideas of the picturesque or these like imageries of the picturesque Nassau and the picturesque Bahamas, and them contending with that upstairs. And so I think a big theoretical through line for this is the idea of telling our own stories, different perspectives, and especially the power of like the Bahamian voice, or people who've lived here for a long time, telling about their own experience outside of the colonial tourism gaze. Um, so when you go upstairs, you encounter a lot of juxtaposition against like what you would call like realism of the downstairs, right? So there's a lot of abstract work immediately when you go up there. I think it's really important the way that people like Kendall or like Sonia, who really deconstruct uh, these ideas of picturesqueness or these imageries of like just like a solid picture of a beach. You have a lot of that happening and rehappening upstairs. So you walk through there and you encounter Max too, who also deconstructs the imaginary by, uh, reflecting off local people. That's just his thing, that's his purview. And then you go into a lot of the rooms that talk about voice, like the Amos Ferguson room, in the room with Chapman, that talks about the power of Bahamian voice. Paired with the exhibition, I have like 50 books and poetry throughout the exhibition. I include some of that downstairs too. I think it's really important when I talked about this, like when I think about this exhibition, if we're talking about different perspectives and different ways of talking about Bahamianness, and ways of like talking about our experience as Bahamian people or living on these islands, or I think it's important to also pair different mediums in which people say the same thing. Um, for example, the leading piece upstairs is Kendall Hanna's Storm, The Eye of the Storm. It's this piece, The Eye of the Storm. I can't remember the name exactly, forgive me. But I had that paired with someone called Hashan Adali's Storm Song. I also paired music with Hashan. And Yasmin Glinton's An Olive Branch. All of these three different mediums all talk about the realities of like the ecological realities of living in Nassau, this overwhelming bear, uh, the being destroyed by hurricanes. I think it's really important to like bring all these things together because it's once again like different perspectives, talking about the same thing, all trying to negotiate what it means to live, in the Bahamas or live here for the past 50 years in juxtaposition to the paradise narrative. Um, yeah,
Even thinking about all of that, like the differences between just upstairs and downstairs. I know one of the things that we noticed as we look at the collection as well, that there are a lot of contemporary artists, especially in the Bahamas, we have collected, but also outside of that, who do a lot of portraits, a lot of work kind of like is people representing like people's faces. And we have a lot of that in the collection as it relates to the photographs. So we have the Sanford Sawyer photographs. Um, we have his name right now is like gone up my head. But we have other photographs like by another photographer. That's a lot of focus on people. It's like portrait studio work, and then all of it is post independence, and you see the difference between downstairs and other people telling our stories and Bahamians telling our own stories. Even the way we take photographs of people, paint people, is totally different. We had people coming here prior to independence and painting people. They painted them in a certain light. It was like this idea of you being a part of the experience as opposed to being an individual. Even the way like you have some pieces that were titled, it was like just locals. That was the name of the title, like because they didn't take the time out to actually like get to know the people they were photographing. Versus when you look at a lot of Sawyer photographs, like he gave them like proper titles, or even if it was a title of their occupation, it gave
yeah,
these people a sense of like belonging as opposed to just a part of the landscape. So
yeah,
that's how we curated the ballroom. The ballroom is heavy on the work. It's almost like wallpaper in there, but it's like overwhelming, but overwhelming in a good way. In that there's so many faces and this idea of the beauty of the people, and not just thinking about the Bahamas and our culture as just the place, but the
yeah,
people are like so would make the place. So when you go in there, it's kind of like a amalgamation or like a coming together of what downstairs and upstairs kind of like talk about the realization of us going into this like new era and like seeing what's beyond this.
yeah,
We also have a section in there that we work with education on outreach, where it's called Snap Like Soil section. So a lot of the photographs that we have by the Sawyer portrait studio at the time has this curtain. It's like a sepia brown curtain, and so we wanted to recreate that studio in that space. So even when you go in that space, you have a moment to actually take a selfie. And
mhm,
once you take a hashtag and it comes up in our feed, we print it. We're gonna print it. So every month or so, we like print them and then we'll add them to the wall. So it's an idea of like having people like actively participate in this idea of like telling your own stories, representing yourself, and
yeah,
continuing that conversation. And I know what's awesome too about the exhibition. I think we mentioned it earlier before. It's like this is the first time the entire collection has like been on display at the gallery, especially at this level. We've only really done it with the PE downstairs.
yeah,
So it's the entire exhibition space. A lot of the work, for example, like the Jamin, has not been to the gallery for over 9, 8 years. So like it's pretty significant for it to be back at the gallery and on display and gonna be up on display for over a year. And it's just a way for a lot of people to get acquainted with the collection. It's probably the first and last time we could ever even do it because we
Yeah,
really maxed
because
out the
yeah,
space. So,
yeah.
with that, I would say that I just want people to be able to come a few times to experience the actual work. There's a lot of little Easter eggs throughout the space,
Hmm.
um, as in like little tidbits that we don't have the time to talk about. So you just have to come and just experience it for yourself.
Hmm.
And I think, it's curated and well enough so that you won't get bored every time you come and see the same work. You'll always something always will stand out to you. I think that's it.
I think that's it.